Hi everyone, this is Dr. Brandon Cruz and Dr. Jeremy Boyd here with our Manips and Sips podcast. This is episode 2. Today's podcast is going to be us kind of talking about why we did our residencies, what we're hoping to get out of them, and what we ended up getting out of them. We also have our sips component here. I'm drinking a Scotch whiskey blend. Jeremy's drinking a beer. I will let Jeremy talk about that since I know nothing about beer.
Hey guys, I'm drinking a Dead Guy Ale from Rogue. The reason why I picked that was I just recently purchased Rogue equipment and squat rack, which is my first big real purchase for my company, Trifecta Therapeutics. So I thought it was pretty fitting, and I'll pass it back off to Brandon.
So I'm drinking Buchanan's Deluxe, aged 12 years. It's a blended Scotch whiskey. I'm pretty much drinking this. I was a newly discovered, turned on by my friend, and I will, I guess, pay homage to him. Being yesterday, I was at his gender reveal party. He's actually having a little girl, so congrats to Pete. But I like this Scotch whiskey. It's pretty smooth going down. I like to put it on ice and a little splash of ginger. Kind of takes the edge off. Good drink. I will talk about the differences between Scotch whiskey and bourbon. As a couple years ago, I was down at Louisville, Kentucky at AMP conference tour. I actually had to present a poster on that one, or at that conference, and AMP had a bourbon tour. So I was able to take the bourbon tour, which is pretty fun, but I'll talk about that in a future podcast. Today we'll, I guess, just start our show, get into it. And Jeremy, what kind of got you on the path to do a residency? When did you do one after school? How far out? And why did you feel it was beneficial to do one when you did it?
Okay, so my big thing was I volunteered and was an aide at a lot of practices by the time I started physical therapy school, and I got real blessed and got real lucky that I got my first affiliation with Dr. Terry Andrews. He owned a place, Egg Harbor Township Physical Therapy and Pain Management, I believe was the name. And so he was the first physical therapist that I met who was a orthopedic clinical specialist. He was a certified orthopedic manual therapist. And just a different quality care that he gave compared to, at that point, I was probably at maybe 10 different places. Not that I like to bounce around. I just liked seeing different type of therapists and everything. So he was very in tune with his patients, and they seemed like they got better quicker. He wasn't just there to put them on heat or anything like that, so he's heavily into manual therapy and then functional exercise. So after I worked with him my second year of PT school, I was trying to figure out how to get to his level as quickly as I can, because I felt so clueless around him. And he always said that was okay, that's to be expected, but I felt almost disappointed that I couldn't be at his level, which you should never feel that way, but that was kind of how it felt for me. I wanted to kind of speed things up. So I looked things up. I looked things up into the OCS, and then I found details about the residency, which then further got enhanced when I went to National Student Conclave. I believe that was in Minneapolis, and there was a couple breakout sessions on residencies at the time. So following that, I knew I wanted to do some sort of residency and go into it a little bit more. So then if you guys were listening into our first podcast, I was talking about my first original idea of Trifecta was to own a place and have 3 levels and 3 different specialists. So that's how it kind of came to be, and from one to the other, I just took one residency at Temple. So what I was looking into originally, I graduated in 2013, November, and I took that job. It was a little high volume. I didn't know that was going to be the case. And then I had to go back to what I really wanted to do. I was like, Jeremy, you set out a plan to start a residency, so let's do it. And I got into a sports clinical residency but also got accepted to work for a private practice that also encouraged or supported doing residencies, and they suggested either doing EIM or Temple's residency. So upon looking at things and the best situation for me, and I wanted to kind of go down the route that Terry did, more into orthopedics, I decided to go to that private practice company. And what made me choose Temple over EIM was the faculty. It was also close to where I was, but Bill Egan and Heidi and Scott were part of their faculty, and I read articles about them, and following that, I knew that was the place for me. And then I talked to Bill on the phone, and he said some encouraging things, and it definitely seemed like the right place for me. So I think I started it about 9 months, maybe a little bit less, after I was a practicing clinician, and it was the best decision for me by far. So we want to talk about your experience and what made you go through it, or?
Yeah, so I started, as many PT students, just kind of volunteering. The first person I volunteered under was a gentleman named Rob Manley. He was, great. I'm sure he still is great at what he does. But at the time where I was, very smart individual, built great rapport with his patients. I learned a lot from him. Then as I was in undergrad at Temple University, I decided to dive a little bit more into the field and volunteered with some of the sports teams over there. I got in with the trainer. The trainer over there introduced me to the PT that was on staff. His name was Joel Roth. I'm not sure if he's still there, but he had his OCS at the time, and I was looking at his, the letters behind his name, and I was just asking him, what OCS stand for. I had no clue what it was. He, explained to me it's a test you study for, and it's just an advancement in the orthopedic realm. There's different board certifications for the different specialties. But it's something he took. He had just taken it. And the reason why I had asked him is because I noticed just a different approach he had, a higher level of thinking than some of the other PTs I had experience with prior. And from that point, I knew this is where I needed to get to. I just, like I said, saw his clinical reasoning, and it was much higher and crisper than any other PT I was around up to that point, which was quite a few. Then going into PT school, I was that guy who just wanted to completely dominate PT school, learn as much as I could. I was the kid in the back of the class, listening to podcasts and YouTube videos, and taking courses. I read the book, Stuart McGill's book at the time, his back performance book. Gray Cook's book. I took Graston and had exposure to ART, and I was just going to come out knowing so much, or I thought I was going to come out knowing so much. And like most PTs, I was very disappointed in what I was learning in PT school. I didn't think it was applicable. I thought it was outdated. So I knew there was more to this profession. I knew there had to be, much more we can do, much more we can learn, a better way to treat. So I started looking into residencies. I had stumbled across a girl in my first internship. She was actually at NYU's residency. Again, saw her level of reasoning. It was much higher than even the gentleman I spoke to before who had just taken the test. So I started looking at the NYU's, and being that I'm in New Jersey, I thought that would be the one. But University of Medicine and Dentistry, where I went to PT school, uniquely had set up at the end of our curriculum, we had basically a 2.5 day modeled, it was called Musculoskeletal 3, but it was kind of modeled after a continuing education course where you had basically 2 full days of learning in that kind of style, and then a test that day. In that, we learned manipulations, CPGs, screening for red flags, and it was just presented in a different light, in a way that can be understood and seen and applied. And it was Bill Egan and Scott Burns who were running Temple's residency program, and we were learning the manips, and I got hooked as soon as we started doing them. I was like, these guys are awesome. They know everything. They know mine was blown. I was completely excited. I was like, I'm gonna do a residency. Definitely, residency is what it was. And I didn't know they did a residency or had a residency till the last day when they were kind of wrapping up and said their spiel and what they were offering. And they also talked about a couple other residency programs to look into. So I went up and I talked to Bill, and I was very eager beaver, and I was like, I really want to do a residency. How can I go about this? And he told me where to look and then apply if I'm interested. And he kept it real airy and light, and no pressure. So I applied. Wanted to go right out of school, but finances weren't there. You're coming out of school broke, have no money, and then you have to pay more money for school. So I called Bill and I was like, I don't have the money right now. You mind if I wait? So at the time they had a rolling admission where you can do the summer cohort or the winter cohort. So he just moved and deferred my slot over to the winter cohort, which was probably the best thing I could have done. He had already recommended having about a year's experience before going into a residency. That way you have something to offer. You've been around the block at least a little bit. But for me, I felt I had, with all my what I thought advanced training and time I'd spent volunteering, just kind of being out of profession, I didn't think I needed a year. So that 4 to 5 month gap, I think, was perfect for me. Like I said, I did a residency mainly because I wanted to learn how to manip. I will be honest. And obviously I still love doing manipulations. That's a big part of my practice, but I gained so much more out of it. Bill, Scott, and Heidi really take the time to give an accurate depiction of what the profession should be, what a primary musculoskeletal provider should be able to offer a patient. We dived heavily into the biopsychosocial realm, heavily into pain science, which when I first learned it, I had no idea what that shit was. But I took a step back and dived into a lot of courses, and I have now learned to integrate multiple aspects of our profession. I think too many times what I'm seeing out there is everyone wants to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just kind of really specialize into one thing, whether it's movement, whether it's exercises, whether it's pain science, whatever the case may be. I think if you're doing that, you're completely missing the boat on our profession. Not to say anybody's wrong, but you should be able to do all things well. To be an expert in orthopedics, you need to be able to screen well, perform manual therapy well, perform exercises well, and whatever other niches you kind of want to go into. But to just kind of hone in on one thing and say you're just going to do movement or not do manual with your patients, you don't touch your patients. We have the scope to be able to do everything. Why not use that? And I think it's really learning when and how to use all of the interventions at our disposal when you really become an expert. And I would say Heidi, Scott, and Bill really fostered that in me. And I would say Scott especially. He's a bit of a ball breaker, great guy, but I came into residency as a hot shot. I was dry needling everyone. And he basically was like, you need to chill. It's not the end-all, be-all, and you're in this residency, kind of take a step back and learn how to do some other things, harness some of the other skill set. So I took his advice, as humbling as that was, and it made me a much better clinician, and he's probably the person I thank the most and look back to the most as that turning point. So, and then from there, I went and took a bunch of other courses. And now I'm in fellowship, so I've really gone down the rabbit hole. But that was really what I got out of it. I really got out to take a step back, question things, appraise things, look for mentorship, look for quality courses. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But Jeremy, do you have anything to add? in residency. I have a couple other things I want to talk about, but
Yeah, as you were saying, was you have to be kind of an expert in knowing when to apply things, and I think, I mean, you go to any physical therapist, any orthopedic physical therapist, a patient who's in pain is going to get better with any therapist, I believe, for the most part. There are some that just don't, maybe not put as much effort into 8 to 4 job for them. But even then, I think people will get to the classic, I'll get to 70-80% better. But what I believe the residency did for me, a lot of it was, you're always going to get like speed bumps on the road to recovery. Someone's going to have a flare up. They're not going to get to their goal as quickly as they want to. So all these sort of things happen, and I think it's being how to manage those bumps, and I think that's when I had the most difficulty. I remember looking back, if I look back at all my numbers and productivity and people, I remember I was calling these people, like I was evaluating them, and they would fall off. Like what happened between the first and the second session was, selling our practice, selling that we can deliver the results that people wanted, and when they do have a setback or a speed bump, that's kind of just part of the process, is how to manage that, and then overall minimizing that. So if you're set in one way and like, oh, we're just going to do movement, just, all right, well, we're just going to progress in movement, maybe you took it too far, what's your solution? If I'm just stuck in a movement realm, how am I going to get past this? And missing out on these little things, and I didn't have a real good pain science background before, and that was probably the biggest change for me. I went to just into residency to get like Terry Andrews, where I was excellent with my hands, doing manipulations, and I think that was the biggest change for me, was to learn how to discuss things with my clients and everything like that. And now I don't really get any people falling off from it. They don't like disappear or anything like that. People finish their plan of cares, and I think that's largely due to the residency training and everything. So that was probably the biggest take home for me. I remember, I just went in with an open mind. I was still kind of the very baby stages of practicing, so I was just like, what, these guys are awesome and amazing. I was pretty impressed with just like the first talk with everyone. I was like, whatever they tell me, I'm going to listen, and I'm going to apply it immediately. They would send an article over, I read it, and I applied it even before we got to a hands-on course. So that definitely changed my perspective, and it's definitely changed how things are for me. And same thing as you were discussing before, Brandon, of it's tough when you come out of school and a lot of us are 6 figures into debt. It's like, how do I manage doing a residency? And I was in the same boat. I got lucky where I got my job, where they offered all right, we'll pay for your residency if you work for us for a couple of years. So that's something that maybe some of you can negotiate. A lot of people will be up for that if you're willing to work for a couple extra years, and that way it's not coming directly out of your pocket. And I had the choice. I didn't have to do that. I could have certainly went somewhere else or done something else, and I could have worked a side job and worked an inpatient. I had the opportunity to get a high-paying inpatient side job and knocked off some of these loans, but my decision was I really want to invest in my education as early as I can, not just for me, for future career opportunities, but for my patients. I'm seeing so many patients now. I want to give them the best care from as soon as I possibly can. I don't want to look back and be like, oh, wow, I totally screwed things up, a year ago. Even though I still do that, I'm like, God, if I look at how I'm evolving, I was like, I probably would have treated that person slightly a little bit different. Maybe that would have shaved off a session or something like that. But I decided to really, I want to invest in my education for the better of my patients from day one. And that was the ultimate goal, but that's led to a lot of opportunities for me. One, doing continuing education with Brandon, now teaching at multiple levels. And then I believe that gave me the big thing of residency is it empowers you as a physical therapist. A lot of times I think we are taken as like the middleman or a secondary healthcare professional, we should just be there to wait for physicians or anything like that. But by the time, especially Heidi, who's, I believe, like the direct access queen, and she believed every patient. And if you go into the military model, which I believe Bill
was at Baylor, I believe,
Baylor.
if I'm not mistaken.
And I believe in their model, the first person you see when it comes to a musculoskeletal injury is a physical therapist. And then Heidi had like a workman's comp deal where they were direct access. So by the time you were done with them and everything that they taught you, you just felt empowered. And that was I always wanted to own my own business, but that definitely threw tons of gasoline on the fire there and got things going. It's like, wow, I can really handle my own business, and I can be the one that people need to see, and I can be their family physical therapist or their go-to guy. So that's, in a nutshell, everything that the residency did for me.
Yeah, to kind of even take it back, really probably 1A or 1B on why I chose Temple's residency was the fact it was a distance-based residency. Looking at some of the other ones, or more the traditional ones, which most of them out there are, it's either a school or hospital-based residency. You're taking a decreased salary, working probably 25 hours a week because you have other aspects of the residency criteria that you have to fill, whether it's rounds, meeting with doctors, teaching the entry-level students, which is all fine. But I knew for me, I was tired of school. I wanted to continue learning, but kind of in a more self-directed manner. So Temple's program is, and there's a few others out there. We can probably have another podcast on some other residencies and or fellows to take out there, fellowships to take out there. I know at Rutgers, I have a course or a class dedicated to this that talks about different residencies and the pros and cons. And then it's up to you to kind of figure out what works best for you. But Temple's is distance-based. It allows you to work a full-time schedule. They send everything or most things through email or through the Blackboard that they use. And you have weekly discussions, weekly articles to read, postings, comments, responding to other cohort members' posts. So you're getting that constant mentorship, guidance, bouncing ideas off other clinicians that either have the same amount of experience or more or less or whatever the case may be. And then you meet up for a weekend intensive, probably once a month for a total of 6 times through, Temple's residency, to go over what you went over the previous weeks via online and to go over manual techniques. So this allowed me to work. Everyone's worried about paying back loans. I worked 50 hours a week for my company I was working with previously, and probably another 10 to 15 hours personal training on the side. So that's probably 65 hours a week I was working, 55 to 65 hours a week I was working, on top of another, what would you say, about 10 to 20 hours a week of residency work that they gave you, readings.
Yeah,
I mean, you get to kind of choose how much you really want to go into it, but I was the geek that read 10 articles a week and was trying to absorb everything I could. So I put the time in. I was putting 70, 80-hour weeks in. I collected a full or beyond a full paycheck, and the cost effectiveness was only about $8,000. I had CEU money from the company I was with, so that was part of it. And then you figure the other part is probably just some courses you would take anyway. But instead of just a course that you take for a weekend, you have to implement on your own, I got mentorship. I had virtual rounds. We would go every other week, talk about different cases. You had 4 to 6 people who would give you and bounce ideas off of. The teacher would be there guiding and telling you, their opinion, what the research said, what they've experienced. So you really had a full breadth and depth, and it gave you mentorship. It gave you 8 to 10 people's different viewpoints, that's how you expedite learning. That's how you get better mentorship, whether it's in PT, whether it's in business, whether it's in life. mentorship is the way to go, whether it's in a formal round of a residency or an informal of looking somebody up and asking to be them to mentor you. That is where the real knowledge happens. So I learned a lot from the virtual rounds, and learning from my peers and learning from the teachers. So I would say that was huge comparatively compared to doing a school or hospital based residency.
Or just taking a course.
Yeah, just taking a course.
Get that.
It's very hard to. Thanks, Jeremy, for bringing that up. It's very hard to really implement things on a consistent basis. And sorry, we just had somebody interrupt us. Very hard to implement things on a consistent basis. Having a mentor and someone. Can we press pause on this?
Yeah.
Sorry about the interruption, guys. But as I was saying, mentorship is probably the best avenue to go towards it. And what residencies really provide is that constant feedback and someone to be a sounding board for you, just to kind of be a checks and balances for you every couple weeks. Or really anytime you needed to. I mean, we had access to our mentors at any point in time. We shoot them an email or a text and we get on a call. But why that differs from a course, people think you could just go out and take a bunch of courses and be okay. And some people may be, but it's very hard to really implement what you're doing or what you've learned in a 2-day course that's jam-packed full of new techniques and then take them to the next day and remember the little subtleties that were talked about and have no one to really bounce it off of. And I've seen a lot of people, and it's happened even with some of the courses we've taken as I've followed up with some of the people, and they loved the course, they learned a lot, and then they kind of weren't really sure. And having that person to really bounce an idea off of or a technique off of and practice is where it's really at. A lot of people like to follow online mentors and things like that, which some of them are good. But if you ever notice that some mentors, it just feels like it's a little empty. It's probably because they're going over the same things and there's really no depth to it. True mentorship really dives deep into, the issue at hand. It's layering, it's brutal, it's honest. It requires a lot of self-reflection, a lot of self-awareness. And being able to kind of take off that protective armor to be, like Jeremy said, open-minded to whatever critique that's happening. That takes time. You're not going to learn that in a course, especially a course that teaches you certain techniques. You want courses that really build on each other, develop a thought process, develop that clinical decision-making. That's where it's really at. And there are courses like that are out there that do that. And I know Jeremy was kind of alluding to being open, but I'll pass it off to you, Jer, and we'll begin to wrap it up there.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more with what you're saying about mentorship. I was blessed that I had my mentor actually right next to me. He sat less than 5 feet away from me, Tom Michaels. He didn't go through a residency, but he's an orthopedic clinical specialist, and that was amazing. It was literally nonstop mentoring for every hour that we overlapped, and that was most of the week. I can say even a lot of times that, I'd be working with a patient's progressing, doing well or something like that, and then he would just insert himself and be like, oh, you should do this. Oh, you're totally missing this. And sometimes, I'm not going to lie, it ticked me off a lot of the times, but, sure as hell, most of the time he was right, or he sped up the process. For the clients, and I remember so many times I'm like, I wish he didn't do that. But now looking back at it and being mature about things, he definitely helped out. So hopefully you're listening in, Tom, and I do thank you for all those moments where you just kind of stuck in and be like, oh, you should correct this form and do this, or why haven't you looked at that? But that was a really big piece for me, and a lot of the times another humbling experience for me was those, as Brandon was mentioning, the virtual rounds where we would discuss, a client that we're having, maybe a tricky one or an interesting one, and then having the entire residency team, fellow residents and the faculty listen in and everyone give their two piece. And I came out thinking, well, I'm a doctor. I got, a good couple of years of musculoskeletal. I did an ortho and sports afil. I should, I know the bread and butter of physical therapy. And, a lot of times, and I'm pretty sure, was it Scott? He chewed me up pretty good for one of my final presentations.
I remember that.
Right? Yeah, I remember you were like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, the final presentation. We can go out and enjoy ourselves a little bit. We're done with the residency after tomorrow, at least the semester. I was like, oh, okay. And then I came in, and Scott was my advisor, and he proofread my presentation. And I get up there, and Brandon and another friend of ours, Cheryl, they deliver rock star presentations. I'm like, oh God. And I get up there, it was doing all right, but the first person who started asking me questions and started grilling me was my own advisor, Scott, and it was so humbling. And it really made me think. I'm like, wow, I really don't know anything, and maybe I did lead this patient down the wrong way, or it was a patient with who I thought had complex regional pain syndrome. I was convinced. I looked up the Budapest rules and everything like that. I was sold on that, and by the time the Q&A ended, I was just like, I don't know what this patient has, and what was I doing? And they were able to talk to me and give me better guidance for not only that patient but future patients. So real humbling experience, and it made me think that I don't know everything and I can't kid myself. And that was probably the biggest thing I gained from PT, and there's always so much to learn from it. So that's probably the last thing I need to say about that.
And just to say what you're saying, I think Scott did this very well. Questioning you and your thought process, which made you think, and if you couldn't come up with an answer, you probably had a flawed thought. I think he was one of the best at really just not belittling you or anything like that, but just questioning you. And when you realize, well, maybe I didn't know what I thought I knew, that right there was the learning purpose, the learning moment, I should say. And just to wrap up, that's how you expedite the learning process through mentorship. There's a quote by Jeffrey Maitland, he's one of the forefathers of physical therapy and manual therapy, and specifically, he says, there are clinicians who work 30 years and only have about 1 year of experience, and there could be a clinician who works 1 year and has about 30 years of experience. And Jeremy, you and I have talked about this before, investing early. That goes beyond your profession. Think of your profession and think of yourself, whether you're doing a self-development or trying to advance your career. It's like compounding interest. You invest early and often, and down the line that will pay off. It may not pay off right away, but it's compounding interest in yourself. And then I believe Elon Musk, and a couple other of the self-development guys or the gurus out there who are doing big things in life. If you're trying to expedite and do things faster, there's no shortcut. You got to put the time in. But if the person next to you is putting out a 40-hour work weekend and you're putting an 80-hour work weekend, it took them a year to accomplish will take you 6 months. What takes them 2 years will take you 1 year. What takes them 4 years will take you 2 years, and so on and so forth. So put the time in, work hard, invest in yourself early, and you'll be all right.
Couldn't say it better myself, and not really much else to say.
All right. Guess with that, we'll wrap it up. We're on our third drinks here, so before things get a little sloppy, I guess we'll end it. That's end of Manips and Sips podcast 2, and stay tuned next week for our next topic.
Yeah, and if anyone, again, has any questions, feel free to message our Facebook group, Manips and Sips. We also have an Instagram. These podcasts should go up live to all podcasts, including Apple. And then you can find us at, me personally, The Decent Doctors, my personal Instagram, and my company's Trifecta Therapeutics. And Brandon can be found at Dr. B. Cruz, and also Pursue PT Now. All right, thank you again, and signing off.